Welcome back. This is week 5 of our restoration series emails, and we're recapping, first of all, what we talked about in the sermon on Sunday. And you did a really great job, Chris, of talking about like what it meant to be provoked instead of offended. And one of the highlights on the screen that you kind of walked us through for a while was offense can isolate us. And that was a really good point, and one I took notes again, one I wanted to stand out as we process the sermon. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So once again, A+ student, we as human beings, when we feel pain, we want to not feel that pain. So when something happens and we are offended, that's a very pain-filled response, right? And so we want to get away from that thing. Now, sometimes like we have power, so we can crush that thing. But more often than not, if we've taken offense to something, we're hurt. We want to get away, right? Just like putting our hand on a hot stove, we want to take it away. And so what we do in our relationships is if someone has offended me, we go away from that person, we cut them out. And that can be really, really dangerous. There are times where for our own health, that's the right thing to do. Sure. But that's usually not from offense. Right? Offense tends to be something was done, I don't like it, and so I'm going to hide, isolate, pull away. So that was really important for me as I reflected even in my own relationships, like when do I feel like I have to go isolate, and am I taking offense in those moments?
Yeah, that is a good thing to process, because I think we want to avoid conflict. There's a bunch of things we want to avoid when we're offended. But yeah, you said provoked leads us to curiosity that could encourage communication and conversation. And I put in my notes, I don't know if you said this or not, but even when you don't agree.
Especially when we don't agree. That's the whole thing. If we surround ourselves with people, this is why no matter which election it is, everyone is blown away if their candidate doesn't win. Because they surrounded themselves, and we've curated our social media, right? The people, like when we like something, Facebook and YouTube and all the grams, they all go, oh, we want more of that, right? So if we like a conservative video, we get more conservative things in our feed. If we like a liberal video, we get more liberal things in our feed. We do this, we curate our life to exclude the people who say something different, but that's really counter to the gospel call. The gospel call is we go into places where people do disagree with us. They may or may not do so with kindness, but we're actually called to engage, and curiosity always gives us a posture of leaning in, right? I think of a child, and they hear something and they're curious, right? Yeah. And what do? Their eyes light up and they get really excited. And even if it's something that challenges their beliefs, right? They can't wait to kind of hear, okay, well, what about?
Or they ask why 500 times.
Oh, yeah.
Another thing you mentioned was the way we respond is our choice.
So I hope I said this well. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Like,
because we all have done it wrong.
Yeah. I try really hard not to try to moderate people's feelings. You are allowed to feel whatever you feel. But the ability to feel something and choose how we respond is a mark of the disciple. What do I mean by that?
Good question. Why don't you answer?
So what I mean by that is Jesus preparing to go for, if you can take this cup away from me, please do so. And if not, that will be done. That's really powerful. So the choice to respond in grace, we like to think of it as, oh, well, that must be easy. Actually, no, it's really, really hard because we're offended. And here's the thing, sometimes we're right. And we always think we're right. Sometimes we're right, and so we feel like we shouldn't have to. And now, actually, the way we respond is different than the way we feel.
Yeah. Good thing to remember there. There was another point, and I think you had this up on the TV too. When we see hurt, let it lead to compassion that will lead us to engage in changing the situation. So moving to action instead of staying in that offense.
Yeah, you do this really well. I'm going to embarrass you for a moment. You do this excessively well. Like, we will be in a setting where I start to feel anger. And when Sarah and I lead together, a lot of times I look for her cues, and I don't know, maybe you look for mine, but it's like, are we on the same page? Like, we'll be in a tough situation, and I'll look over to see, are we on the same page? And there are times where I'm struggling to continue in my Christ-likeness with my anger, and I see compassion on your face. I don't know if you know this, but I will see compassion, and I almost see, not pity, but I almost see this sorrow of what somebody's experiencing. And I get really, I can be really humbled by that sometimes, because I want to see everything fixed. And, the truth is, anger leads to action sometimes. Like when I get angry about the state of the world around me and I respond in a Christ-like fashion, I act, right? And compassion sometimes is that first step in action where we're just alongside someone. Like before we fix, before we correct, before we engage in that moving forward, sometimes we just have to be alongside someone. So you've actually taught me a lot of this in the last, 3 or 4 years, and I've really appreciated that, where and I think in 2020, I think of these different times where I've struggled with, I don't like to see the world this way and I want to fix it. And you've helped give perspective of like, right, but these are people and they're going through this and they're afraid of it. This is what's happening. You need to address them as people, not who you wish they were. And I really appreciate that about you.
Why? Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're going to slip me a 20, right?
I don't know. You can cut that on the tape. But no, so there is that important part of like identifying what is happening around you, and yes, identifying the people and the situation and all those things, but allowing that to move us into action instead of staying there and taking the offense. And then just starting to ask yourself that question, like, what is it in the culture around you that offends you?
Yeah. So I think everyone's going to experience it differently. I think for most of us, it's a feeling. For me, it really does well up in anger. I see something and it's just not the way it should be. And I get angry. I get angry for victims. I get angry for, and again, it's not like I just want to rage for the sake of raging. It's not that I'm angry even like at someone sometimes. It's just like, this isn't God's best, and I struggle to be okay seeing what God's best could be, and it's not there. So yeah, you gotta do that differently than me.
I do, for sure. We're different.
Show us the better way.
Well, not like that. But no, I tend to see what's wrong or what's off and want to pray about, hey, like I don't necessarily go into, I have to fix this mode. And sometimes I do ask the question, like, what's my responsibility in this? Or what is my part in this? So I guess in my brain, I do stay on the curiosity realm a little bit longer than the ready to go and act. So I ask more questions before, but that's just each personality. You're going to look at this a little bit differently. You're going to see things that are off a little bit differently, and how you show up should still be fully authentically you. Because we're all following Jesus, so we're all on the same team. We are all wired differently, and that's important too. Like there are going to be people passionate about different things and see changes that should be in different areas that I'm not going to see. And like that's how we work together as the body of Christ in those different areas to walk in restoration.
And it's supposed to be like that, and trust that God has orchestrated the church around you. Not just Shine Lines Church, but the church universal, that God has orchestrated. And that's where I appreciate the different way that you approach it, because sometimes we just need to ask, like, what is our role in this and how do we honor it well? And sometimes, I hope I'm not too much, like sometimes we don't need to ask any more questions. We don't need to pray anymore. We need to go. We need to get something,
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Well,
stay there for 5 years.
No. And admittedly, I appreciate when I have someone alongside who will challenge me, right? Like, actually, is it ours? Right? You've had to ask that. I just smacked my microphone. You have to ask that of me. And sometimes I have to, there have been times where I've had to say, actually, this is ours. Let's go. Or how do we prioritize this? And so trust that there are people around you, and maybe it's a coworker, right? Like our situation. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's just someone that God has appointed that you won't never even get to know their name. Play your part. Do what God's called you to do, and trust Him to bring the pieces together.
Yeah. So we're to our questions for the week.
Yeah.
So what is it in the culture that offends you? So we've kind of covered that one.
Yeah.
And then number 2, what would it look like if those offenses turned into being provoked to do something for Jesus? And you gave some examples of what it looked like in our community, but really just taking that and applying it to your individual lives, into your places where you interact with people, or it could be a worldwide mission. There's no limits.
Right.
It's not like you have to fill a list of 10 different things that align with what we see. So there's no boundary on this.
And it's so important to understand our goal is faithful response. So I gave the example, shortly after the repeal of Prohibition, we see Alcoholics Anonymous begin, right? And it's using this newfangled concept called psychology to help people, and it's infused with faith. They've become less Christian since then, but again, like the concepts there of recognizing you are not able to do this on your own, you actually need God. And now they do a little bit different now. But again, for me, Jesus, like that is the person who's going to help. That's God. He's going to help you through this. So that started with, now that Prohibition's repealed, people are going to become alcoholics again, and they were the whole time. But we need to step into this. The government's not going to fix it anymore. And so again, like that was a small choice to find a way to engage people struggling with alcoholism that changed the world, right? That changed many, many lives, and many within our own congregation. So God gets to choose your scale. Like God gets to choose. Like if you are a foster parent and you foster parent one child and then adopt, that's amazing, right? That's phenomenal. That's tremendous. If you're a foster parent and foster 30 kids throughout your time, or if you go start an orphanage in Conakry, God gets to choose your scale. You get to choose your obedience. Choose obedience and allow Him to decide what that looks like, whether it's local, whether it's global, whether it's one child, whether it's a billion. God will handle that. You just be faithful.
Yeah.
Got a little preachy there.
Huh. Thanks for joining us. And we hope that you will engage with these questions and just go a little deeper in your faith and your obedience to what God is calling to you to in this restoration work.
Yeah. Like Bono, you too.